This session is actually an example of collaboration and partnership that the Indonesia Economic Forum has been doing over the years. I think I gave a little bit of a background. We are in the 10th annual Indonesia Economic Forum. It's been 10 years since we started in 2014. But for, I would say, about 7 years straight, we were basically a conference. And we were a thought leadership platform. So we considered ourselves as connecting the dots on the various things happening in Indonesia. We would take up different themes. But the one theme that we took very early on is digital. So from the early days, 2014, 2015, we started addressing how digital transformation is taking place in Indonesia. And as you can guess, our speakers were people like Nadiem Makarim, who at that time was only the CEO of Gojek. He is now the Minister of Education. But these are the kind of people who came through the Indonesia Economic Forum. And I'm very proud to say that I think all the major players, Traveloka, all the other major players, they've all been at Indonesia Economic Forum events. And we've been a witness to their journey and the witness to how Indonesia has progressed over the last 10 years. And we were majorly impacted by COVID, where we had to change from being a physical networking platform to completely digital. And it taught us many things. And I would say the most important thing it taught us was when we had a platform where we had 700 to 1,000 people coming to the Indonesia Economic Forum, suddenly when we went digital, we had 5,000 to 10,000. So our reach just went dramatically up. I still remember Shoaib going to the studio with Groovy and broadcasting live to a large audience, which we would not meet, but we would have interaction with them because there was nobody here like we have today. Talk to the camera, exactly. And we would all be in different parts of the city to monitor to see how good is the quality, and all the questions, moderation, everything was done online. And then when COVID's effect went away, last year was the first time we went back to a semi-model, and we decided that the format that works is hybrid. We would have a team of speakers in the room like we have today, and all of you are qualified speakers who add to the discussion on the day. We would have our key speakers on the day, but the audience would not be here. The audience would all be online. And with that format last year and this year, we are continuing to keep to our 7,000 to 10,000 people reached out across 49 countries, because the power of what we do today is not just live, because at this moment, in the time zone we are in, we won't be expecting anybody to log in from the US or Europe. Yeah, Europe maybe yes, but US definitely not because of the time zone. So everybody in the other part of the world would follow us on the recorded sessions, which would go onto YouTube. So all that we discussed today goes onto YouTube from tomorrow onwards. It's available to people across the world, any different time zone, doesn't matter, because we go on demand. So that's the power of technology, and I think we have really benefited at the Economic Forum by a change in format, and that has really expanded our reach and the kind of people who we can interact with. Next year, we're looking at getting more hybrid speakers so that we can actually have speakers from the US, from Europe, and interact with them sitting in a room like this on a screen, which I think is of a different kind of value. And so that's something that we would do more of. But beyond that, we've been doing more collaborations. And the collaboration is another way of extending our reach to sub-communities and to people around the region. So the first one we did last year was to collaborate with Poonam. And Poonam is here today because she is our partner for a year now on an expansion called the Indonesia India Business Forum. And what it does is it connects the Indonesian and the Indian side to work more closely together, and officially, we are partners of the Indian Embassy here, as well as the Indonesian Embassy in New Delhi. So you can see how very quickly that idea has brought together the most key stakeholders between the two countries, and that is running very well. Thank you, Poonam. You've done a great job in running that. The second outreach that we did was with Investor Trust. Primus was here, of how we can get our across the language barrier, and see if we can work more with the Indonesian Bahasa side so that we can also reach Bupatis, Wali Kotas, and governors in the region. So next year we'll be doing a lot more work in the Daira, working together with Investor Trust and with One Tiknas, because One Tiknas has One Tikda, which is in the Daira. So that collaboration would help us to reach across within the region. When I say regional, is within Indonesia. But there's another word, regional means within ASEAN. So today we have here Ashish, who is the CEO and co-founder of the ASEAN Economic Forum. Ashish is from Singapore, and he's been discussing with us since now, what, 8 months, 7 months? 7 to 8 months, about how we can collaborate. And there is a reason for this collaboration, because Ashish is based in Singapore, which is the headquarters of all the technology companies, and they're all headquartered either in Singapore or in Thailand. Not here, very few are actually headquartered in Indonesia. So our connect to the industry is coming from where Ashish is based, but ASEAN Secretariat is in Indonesia. All the embassies, the ambassadors of ASEAN are all in Jakarta. Therefore, the partnership between Jakarta and Singapore makes absolute sense. So we will have a back office in Jakarta, which would be taking care of operational issues, running programs, working with the ASEAN Secretariat, and working with all the various stakeholders who are based here. We would have a footprint in Singapore, and I think over a period of time, we'll also be able to get across to Bangkok and Thailand in order to engage with the organizations who are based there, such as USAID. A lot of the aid agencies are based in Thailand. So that triangle between the three countries would really make ASEAN Economic Forum work. So that's the idea of partnering and collaborating to increase our experience and what Indonesia Economic Forum has learned so far, so that we can accelerate or amplify what we do in partnership with a lot of other stakeholders. So I'd like to welcome Satvinder Singh and Poonam. If you may shift, bring your signboard and shift over here. We'll get started very quickly. Shoaib, you'll have to move here next to me. I'll join you. No, it's okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. I can move here. Brian, do you mind moving here? Yeah. Later on, Ilham will join us later at around 5. Ashish, you have to be here. Oh, yeah. Okay, a big round of applause for Brian. Thank you for being here with us. I believe he has to leave. And we'll see you soon in more events next year. Thank you. Yes. So I'm going to ask Poonam to take over the session. And the format actually is very simple. It's about 45 minutes, a discussion on issues related to ASEAN, but it will be opened by Satvinder Singh. Do you have a presentation or would you just talk? Okay, so he would address us and let us know about some of the issues that will trigger a discussion between us. And after we have about 45 minutes, we have a Q&A with him as well. And feel free to ask any questions or any suggestions you may have. At the end of it, we will close with Ashish Kapahi giving us closing remarks on what he's doing with the ASEAN Economic Forum. And all of this would be moderated by Poonam Sagar. So over to you, Poonam. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sachin. As you all noticed, there was a lot of movement happening. And and that's a reason for this. It is all about sharing knowledge. And I'd like to thank Sachin first and foremost, because we have learned from him and we have collaborated and taken on the best practices from Sachin, such that we can also expand this value chain to the Indian businesses and the Indonesian businesses here in Indonesia. We know that India has a great trade deficit with Indonesia. In fact, it's quite large. And Indonesia has a trade of almost $50 billion with India, and India is not even reaching 1. So it's quite a large deficit. And one of the reasons why we see this as very important is that recently, and you might have noticed as well, there are lots of Indian startups in Indonesia. There's a lot of Indian businesses in Indonesia, and there's a reason for that. Because as it has been brought up time and time again during the last 2 days, the natural resources, the large number of people, and the opportunities here make it a hotbed for starting new enterprises, and which is what we are taking advantage of. But at the same time, this is an opportunity to invite Indonesian businesses to India. And there has been a lack of communication, for which we decided to create the Indonesia India Business Forum along with the Indonesia Economic Forum. So it gives me tremendous pleasure that this has now been extended to the ASEAN Economic Forum. And I'd like to welcome His Excellency Satvinder Singh to this, as well as Ashish for taking on this baton and creating more people-to-people connect, creating a greater economic, not only diversity in what the kind of businesses that will happen, but also increase the value chain all over ASEAN. Quickly, I'd like to introduce Satvinder. He told me, keep it very, very short. So the shortest I can think of is when I asked ChatGPT, describe Satvinder in 3 words. So, what did you get? So what I got was, the first word I got was strategic. So Satvinder, you're very strategic. And the second word it said was experienced. And the third word that it said, responsible. Responsible. So those are 3 words for you, Satvinder, and it gives a lot of hope that this ASEAN Economic Forum, in your capable hands, will probably move forward very quickly, very action-oriented. So, his intro will probably come on screen, but I'd just like to share. No need. So he is a very dynamic person. He's the Deputy Secretary-General of the ASEAN Economic Community. And with a wealth of 27 years, he's a seasoned professional. And he is a strategic visionary, contributing to the advancement of ASEAN's economic integration agenda. His journey includes not only an undergrad in social sciences from NUS in Singapore, but also participation at the Harvard Business School Advanced Management Program. So join us as we explore Satvinder Singh's insights and strategics driving ASEAN's economic future.
Thank you, Poonam, for the introduction. Thank you for keeping it short. I appreciate that. First of all, a very good afternoon to all of you here physically in this beautiful location. We are in a fantastic library. I think this is the Habibi Library, right? Amazing, amazing location for us to meet, and amazing, distinguished place for us to launch our ASEAN Economic Forum together. And let me also please acknowledge Mr. Sachin Gopalan, the founder and the CEO of the Indonesia Economic Forum. Thank you for reaching out to us. I must say that since I've touched base and become the Deputy Secretary General for the ASEAN Economic Community since 2021, I've been based in Jakarta. And I've been watching Sachin and what he has been doing. And clearly, the Indonesian Economic Forum is one of those platforms that attracted the attention of ASEAN. So even though we are in the same city, it's not like we get to meet each other every day, right? So we were watching the work that you do, and we also have been trailing you in terms of your impact that you're making in other ways, including your ICT projects with the Indonesian government, training of digital skills to the teachers, and we've been extremely impressed. So clearly, we've been watching you, and we were looking for partnerships in Jakarta, how we can actually reach out to the people of not just Jakarta and Indonesia, but the people of ASEAN. How do we build a much more impactful, collaborative platform on the business side to tell people more about what we are doing at the ASEAN level. ASEAN, as you know, is been around for 56 years, right? This is an agglomeration of the 10 countries. Timor-Leste is an observer waiting to join us. But ASEAN today is noticed by the world. So we are no longer, we don't need to tell people who ASEAN is. Today, all the largest dialogue partners in the world have ambassadors to the ASEAN, from the United States to China to Japan to many of the European countries. They have actually appointed dedicated ambassadors to the ASEAN. I think that kind of shows you today that ASEAN matters. And why shouldn't it not matter? Because today our GDP is no longer small, right? When we first started the ASEAN Economic Community in 2015, when at that time our trade was somewhere around only about, roughly about maybe $2 trillion. Today, in 2022, trade stands around US 3.8 trillion, right? Today, we have become a destination in the world where only after the US, we are the largest recipient of FDI as a collective, the 10 countries. Only the United States actually collect more investments than us as a region. And in the developing world, today we have displaced China. We attract more investments than China. So clearly we matter today. And what has happened and what has changed, I think in the last several decades, what we have seen is the leaders of ASEAN. It doesn't really matter which party comes to power in which country. All the leaders of ASEAN have a very strong dedication towards economic growth and the betterment of their people. I do see that is the largest single, what I call competitive edge of our region versus any other part of the world. And that has actually allowed, it doesn't matter who sits at the table in the ASEAN summit, most of the leaders understand the language of economic growth. They understand the language of improving the lives of their people, and they truly understand how to get there, I think much better than many regions in the world. And this is why even this year when Indonesia was the chair, right, they did a fantastic job. I think many of you have felt the ASEAN, right? ASEAN Matters, the epicentrum of growth, right? You saw how President Jokowi was able to bring the message of ASEAN to the common man in Indonesia. But at the same time, this year was also a year where very important, very, very important integration efforts were being made by leaders. Number one, we actually had an agreement by the economic ministers and the leaders to go ahead to start the negotiation of a digital economic framework agreement. This is the DEFA agreement. The DEFA agreement is going to be the world's first regional level digital agreement that is going to be legally binding. There are no legally binding digital agreements in the world, just voluntary basis. So we are going to have the world's first legally binding digital agreement that's going to connect the 10 countries together, and it is going to cover everything from the movement of data across borders, seamless movement of digital payments, harmonizing of our protocols on cybersecurity to protect the entire region, right down to promotion of collective integrated digital trade, including the movement of specialists, skills, labor force for the digital world. So this is not comprehensive. There are altogether 9 provisions supported by another 43 provisions going to be negotiated under the DEFA agreement. The good news is tomorrow as we speak, the negotiators are in town. Tomorrow is going to be the historical start in Jakarta of the negotiation of DEFA. So guess what? Everyone is watching us from United States to Japan to Australia. Everybody is watching what ASEAN is doing because none of them have such a regional arrangement or agreement that comprehensive, okay, and that big in scale of what we want to do. So this is what ASEAN potentially can do, right? So this happened again in a short period where Secretariat worked with the leadership of ASEAN, guided by the leaders' passion. Economic ministers were all through to get this out because they are clear what they want to achieve. So that is one. Second important thing that happened this year is we also gotten for the first time our movement in the area of decarbonization. We are moving ahead. In fact, last year we had the framework for circular economy binding the entire region. This year, under Indonesia's leadership, we actually went ahead with the framework on blue economy. And next year, we're going to work very actively on the full implementation plan on blue economy. But another important anchor decarbonization initiative that the leaders pushed through, and they all agreed, was at the regional level, an ASEAN carbon neutral strategy. This is a strategy that's going to be negotiated and worked on in the next decade. And this will complement the efforts of each of the individual ASEAN member states on their NDP plans for Paris Agreement. But there are a lot of effort that's needed in decarbonization where individual countries cannot sort. A lot of the issues need to be managed at the regional level. And this is what the carbon neutral plan is. 8 strategies, 16 identified no regret move initiatives that the leaders have now sanctioned that we deliver them. I give you one or two of examples of the 16, what it looks like. For example, when you want to decarbonize, one of the most important things is circularity, right? A movement of goods. Today, you cannot move any reuse, waste, remanufacturing products across any part of ASEAN or the world. Most of economic agreements don't allow the circularity movement of things easily anyway. But when you talk about the future of decarbonization, the future of circularity, that's probably one of the biggest important elements we need to sort. And we are the earliest region in the world, not even a WTO they can achieve. ASEAN is the first region in the world we are beginning to embrace in wanting to include circularity into our ATIGA FTA, the FTA that we have in ASEAN. We are now in the process of upgrading that. In the next 2 years, we are negotiating towards adding circular elements into our ATIGA. So it is examples like that. This is just one of the 16 initiatives. The second one I can talk about is, as part of our decarbonization plan, we need to connect our power grid, our connectivity, right? This is where it's going to be one of the biggest decarbonization initiatives. The ASEAN power grid needs to be up and running, and we need to create a tradable electricity market for the region. Again, this is another one of the 16 initiatives that have been identified. So I can't go through all of it, but I want you all to look out for the ASEAN Carbon Neutral Plan strategy. But you don't have to worry because these are the kind of things which are going to center and become part of our conversations under what Sachin has described, the launch of the ASEAN Economic Forum. We are wanting to work with the group in order to develop outreach, which sometimes the Secretariat alone cannot handle ourselves. We are so busy on the technical parts of negotiation, but when it comes to conversation to private sector, I notice we always lag. This is where we value partnerships with the Indonesia Economic Forum group, because we think you have proven that you can do effective outreach, and we want to work with you through your partnership and network to grow out this relationship to the entire region. And again, it's not just physical events, but also presence online that we're looking for, and we hope to work with you in the next couple of years to bring out some of those conversations, discussions, and engage the private sector to be able to feed in and also to be able to take out what's happening at the negotiations that are taking place at the ASEAN level. Sometimes ASEAN becomes like a black hole. There's too much happening. It's not easy to navigate, not easy to translate. This is where only a businessman can translate what another businessman needs to know. This is how we value this partnership with Sachin and Ashish for coming together in taking this venture with us. We are a knowledge partner to them at this stage. We are going to be hoping that they are able to take some of our content to be able to bring out to the business community, and maybe over the years we can strengthen our relationship step by step. So I hope I've given you enough of a breadth of the kind of things that are coming. There is a lot happening on the ASEAN side. Like I said, today we matter, but sometimes what I worry is within ASEAN, sometimes we don't appreciate what's going on in our region. I think for the older generation, I was just telling Sachin, I think the older generation business community, they were a lot more connected. They have a lot more friends across borders. They know each other a lot better. But now the second generation that's taken over, right? Many of the second generation business families, the children are sent to schools in the West. So they have a lot more friends in UK, they have a lot more friends in the United States, in European Union or Australia. When it's end of the year holidays, where they want to travel, they'll go and visit their networks and friends that are located where they studied, and that's what they are familiar with. How many of those generation of CEOs want to travel to Manila, want to come to Indonesia, or how many of them want to come to Thailand? Maybe Thailand, they will go to Phuket for holiday, or Indonesia, they will go to Bali. but how many of them want to come to Jakarta to meet business people and make friends? I think that's what's lacking today. And I'm hoping in some way you guys can help us break that barriers and bring the decision makers of our next generation to the platform to be able to influence decision making, even guide our growth and development that ASEAN needs to get to, because so many of the transformations, whether it's digital or sustainability, would require the new generation of our leaders in business community to drive. And we need them with us. We need to move this journey with them. So I think with that, I'd like to keep it short and sweet and leave more time open for you guys if you have any questions for me to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Satvinder. That's a big agenda that you have there. Not only to connect whatever's happening in the ASEAN community, but also to bring together all the business heads to talk together right here within the ASEAN countries. So shall we go to Ashish first, or? So I'd like to give a short introduction to Ashish. So after I looked up ChatGPT for Satvinder, I had to look up Ashish as well. So what ChatGPT says about Ashish is that he's global. And the second word it says is collaborative and experienced. So I think you've found a good fit in Ashish for the ASEAN Economic Forum. So just very briefly, so Ashish Kapahi is a business leader with over 25 years of experience in the dynamic world of technology. He earned a nomination for the Outstanding Chief Executive Overseas Award from IE Singapore, a testament to his exceptional skills. He's currently, as you can see, he's co-founder and CEO of Gates APAC. Beyond his corporate achievements, Ashish is an advocate for public-private partnerships. He has played a pivotal role in initiating and leading various PPP and intergovernment projects, both regionally and globally. And he continues to be a driving force in shaping the future of the technology channel ecosystem. So Ashish, over to you.
Poonam, thank you so much. Did this come out of ChatGPT as well?
That was days of research.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. His Excellency Satvinder Singh, dignitaries, delegates from the ASEAN Secretariat, colleagues, and my dear friends. It's a privilege and an honor to be given this opportunity to lead such an important position or such an important opportunity to be in the driving seat of the ASEAN Economic Forum, which is a think tank that will work towards inclusive social and economic growth for ASEAN. I am extremely thankful to DSG Satvinder, his team in ASEAN Secretariat, Indonesia Economic Forum, and all the others who have patiently worked with us in the last 8-10 months to come to some sort of an order where we could give this a shape. As you know, ASEAN is almost 60 years old, 56, 57 years old to be precise. It has stood the test of time several times. It is poised to be a 6.6 trillion economy. Very large portion of that, I think between 10 to 14% will come from the creative economy. I was also made to understand that the digital part of it would be approximately $1 trillion. So there is a very bright future for ASEAN. However, and this is the flip side of things that I always like to look at, the world order seems to be changing. And there are some very unprecedented challenges that we have as of today. I like to give it a little term, and I don't want to shake anybody here, but I call it the brave, dark world. And there is a reason why I call it the brave, dark world, because we haven't seen times like this. There is today a phenomena of retreat from globalization. There is a phenomena of de-dollarization. There is challenges on the population dynamics. There is rise in global conflicts. And of course, there is the artificial intelligence, which we have been speaking about. Like the internet, which was meant to democratize the world and do good for the bottom billion, unfortunately, it did not. It created a different level of elitist. We have to be very careful in addressing artificial intelligence as well, because end of the day, it's what goes in comes out. So, in my earlier discussions also, I've been talking about ethics. So it's very important that any of these transformations and artificial intelligences are looked at carefully and processed accordingly. Now, from the ASEAN Economic Forum and as a think tank, we propose some activities that we would like to take forward. One of them is an ASEAN Economic Resilience Index, which we would like to start off immediately and come up with some sort of a blueprint in the next 3 to 6 months, be able to present it possibly in our first meeting. We are also launching, along with Indonesia Economic Forum, the ASEAN Economic Forum Academy, which is more towards skill development and employment. And of course, there are sectorial priorities that we would be working with the ASEAN Secretariat, like the DEFA, decarbonization, and some of these others, which Satvinder has pointed out. And the mining sector, of course, that's the core. That, in fact, there is some discussion that Sachin and I had on that as well. With that, I'd like to pass the floor to Sachin for his words. Sachin, if you may.
Sure. Thank you, Ashish, and thank you, Your Excellency, Satvinder Singh. Firstly, for your kind words of support, because I think it's very important that we have the support of the institution. That empowers us, and it allows us to actually do what we need to do. And the reason I say need to do and want to do is because I think the key word in all outreach is the narrative, and shaping the narrative and having the right narrative in place, because if you don't have one, somebody else will make a narrative for you. And then it's very difficult to undo a wrong narrative that's out there. Then you're playing catch up of trying to say, okay, how do we fix that? How do we correct that? Because we never did our job of setting the narrative in the first place. It is the most important thing in the start of any communication that we have to decide what is the narrative and how should it be out there, and how will that empower all of us to achieve the things that we need to do. So there's a lot of strategic work in what we are setting out to do. And for that, institutional support is absolutely important. So I thank you very much for your endorsement of what we do, and also your partnership and the spirit of cooperation that will help take this forward in the right direction. So that's the first one. The second point I would like to say is, yes, there are many stakeholders in the topics that we talked about. DEFA, for example, is absolutely full of various types of stakeholders who earlier were not there in the conversation. Now we are talking about including the governments, we are talking about including the ministries, we are talking about various stakeholders that we actually did not identify as a stakeholder in the past. So what is the communication? How should that story be told? I think there are different levels of communication. It's not just one story fits all, right? The levels of communication for the different recipients of that information has to be crafted carefully. And that we can do when we understand the issues a lot better. So which is why I support Ashish's need to create some research-based products, because that gives us the capability to understand and assimilate and tell that story in a much better way, because we have research ability to understand. And that needs people, that needs technology. I'm sure ChatGPT and things like that would be a part of it, but we need people on the ground who will be able to help give us the tools to tell the story in a better way and shape the narrative the right way. So I welcome Ashish's initiative to create some research-based indicators which would help us shape the story and tell the story, because there are many various tools of how a thought leadership platform would work. And I think the third important part is the people, and what are the activities and activations we would be doing so that people sit in front of each other, discuss with each other, Sometimes it can be on digital platforms and virtual platforms too, absolutely no problem, because we're dealing with the rest of the world. I think the key point which DSG Satvinder Singh mentioned today, which was like a light bulb for me, was the whole world is talking about ASEAN. You know that until you made that statement, I never did really think of the impact of that. Which means we have a story to tell to the whole world. Therefore, we have to now start thinking of the messaging for the rest of the world. What do we do? I hadn't thought of it to that level until you mentioned it, because...
So I'm intervening today, Sachin. This morning, we actually had a DEFA roundtable. We had 650 people wanting to get into a room for 250 people. We had to turn people away.
Exactly, yes.
So this is the interest that is generating on ASEAN's DEFA negotiation, yeah.
Absolutely. So these are groundbreaking. That's what I really want to say, that if you think ASEAN has come of age, and if you think ASEAN has now come together in a much better way than any other regional initiative anywhere else in the world. I won't name them, but we do know for a fact that if anything has actually worked and come to fruition, ASEAN is the best example we have today. And ASEAN is also a representative of the other side of the world, which doesn't have the same geopolitics that's currently being faced in Europe and US and the rest of the world. So that's actually a key opportunity that we need to find a way to maximize. And we have to find a way that it can add value to the world, not just for within ASEAN, right? Because it comes with power like this comes responsibility. I see that ASEAN could probably lead the way in showing the world of how regional cooperation can actually benefit everybody and not just the region. So I think, with that kind of responsibility on our shoulders, our teams understand a lot better that we have a job to do. And it's not just running workshops and seminars, but it's actually telling a story. And all that we actually do is just part of the tools that we have. But using the tools in a very strategic way, in a very sensible way, tell the story the way, align ourselves with what the ASEAN Economic Community wants to do, and be able to be the storytellers of the ASEAN is actually a great privilege. So I'm really pleased and happy to note that, we would be off to a great start, especially with Satvinder telling us that we actually have a couple of initiatives to immediately focus on. The three things, DEFA, decarbonization, and mining sector are, I think, very important sectors in play. We are jumping into a moving train. So I think that's a great opportunity. As long as we jump in the right way and we stay on the train, then we can help guide the train in the right direction. Really looking forward to this, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. As we start our work, Sachin, I would want to add on more topics. The other big topic is our own ASEAN integration in trade, our ATIGA upgrade. I think businesses in this region need to know what are we negotiating and what needs to be put forward as we finish our negotiation in the next 2 years, right? But another important thing is we, from the ASEAN Economic Community, we have a blueprint that started in 2016. It's ending in 2025. This is the 10-year blueprint. We are working now for the next phase of the blueprint, and Indonesia chairmanship, the leaders came together and they agreed that the next phase is not just 10 years, but it will be from 2026 to 2045, full 20-year, a 20-year visioning for the economic development and growth and integration of ASEAN. So the amount of fodder that we have to work on is limitless. So I think we start first with a full range of events, but there will be no short of potentials for us to bring to the business community. I'm actually excited that we have a lot on the table that we can start communicating and speaking and engaging the business community of ASEAN.
Are there any questions to maybe His Excellency or Ashish regarding this? Just to start off, I see this to be a very big thing. And I'm sure there, like anywhere else, there are lots of challenges, especially with, the different economy, regulatory structures, currency, etc. In your mind, what are the top 3 challenges?
Challenges in context of setting up this project, or
Yes.
challenges of ASEAN?
Of setting up the ASEAN Economic Forum and making it bring value as envisaged.
Yeah. So I will say that naturally when you set up a new platform for anything new, we will have to show very quickly value on the table for businesses, for them to be able to see that they want to be engaged in this. So the challenge is an opportunistic challenge where we will need to move very quickly. And I am very determined that the quality of what we are able to work with the ASEAN Economic Forum platform, I think that may not be so difficult. I think what I'm a little bit more worried is, can we speak to decision makers of the next generation, which I said earlier. I think that's one challenge. I'm not sure, but I think that's where I'm going to put the buck onto Ashish and Sachin to please find us the correct way of being able to reach out to them. I know they all sit in YTP clubs, young professional clubs, YTP clubs in all of our ASEAN capital cities, right? But they all meet only in very high, fancy events. Right? So how do you bring those guys to come and talk to us in our business forum? I think that's a challenge, right? So the third, I will say, will be, Sachin, you mentioned about how this forum is not just talking to ASEAN, but to the world. I think we will need to then also be able to take on that role effectively. But sometimes when you want to speak to the world, it's a different content. Versus you want to talk to your own people of ASEAN and sort out your home, it's a different content. I think that ability to differentiate the value proposition, I think that could be quite challenging, but we will have to be conscious about that, you know. So not every content is useful to the outside world. And some of what I call the dirty linen that we need to clean in our own backyard, I would rather keep it within the ASEAN family, you know. And then we will tell them what they need to know from us. I think that's how maybe we will have to manage that with some savviness. Yeah. So I think those are some of the challenges.
Yeah, I think it's just in line with what Sachin said about setting the narrative right and what is the perspective that we want to present to the world globally. Vijay, please go ahead.
Hello. This is, firstly, I think it's a very, very good idea. And I think, I personally think ASEAN has been a very successful example already in terms of what it has done as an organization. Again, I don't want to take any names, but in comparison to other regional cooperation movements and organizations, ASEAN is one of the better cited or more successfully cited example. And this is, I think, a great initiative to kind of have a, Indonesia Economic Forum kind of a thing on a broader level for ASEAN. I think is a wonderful idea. And as, DSG Satvinder mentioned, I think the key challenge there is to find interest from the top business leaders, whether the old generation or new generation, I don't think necessarily makes a difference, but I think the good quality people need to be able to contribute to it. So one thing that I wanted to suggest was, obviously the Indonesian Economic Forum, being the Indonesian forum, it has to be held here. But if the forum has to be about ASEAN, then maybe one thing to consider is that you also hold it in other ASEAN countries so that there's a more a feeling of involvement from leaders in that ecosystem. That's one. Secondly, if you also consider having some key, I'll call them ambassadors, because we just had this Thai Global Summit in Singapore where all of us were asked to be ambassadors for the various chapters that we were inviting and coordinating with. And so I will just run with that and use that concept. So what I'm saying really is that if we have people in each of these ASEAN countries who we think could be, good and, could be entrusted with recruiting more such people, then I think the forum can be a lot more successful and can create a deeper impact sooner. That's one point. The second point is not about the forum. It's more about the broader things that you're talking about, DEFA, etc., which is really exciting to me. Because I think it's a very powerful idea in terms of, movement of people, sharing of ideas, sharing of businesses and so on. There, I think one two important things, I think, as the whole process is negotiated and finalized, which I would urge may be very helpful to consider. The first is to ensure digital inclusion. And it kind of resonates with what we're talking about the last 2 days, is that one of the issues that I think I couldn't help noticing is that all ASEAN countries are not necessarily the same, and their strengths are different, their weaknesses are different. And therefore, I think one way to bring parity and effective cooperation or easier integration would be to ensure that there is digital inclusion in the whole process. The second is some sort of legal parity. And I say this with my lawyer hat on, that one thing that is very frustrating for a lot of these other, some of these other economic cooperation movements and organizations that I've seen is that while the intent of the group is very good, the top leadership group has great intent, the problem is because different legal systems exist in the member countries, and therefore from point of view of business, I mean, let me say this, I'm from India. We have a federal system there. Even in a country which is a sovereign country, every state is not made the same for a business person. Every state has its attractions and its death traps. So that kind of thing would be even broader in a larger ASEAN kind of framework. So I think it may be worth exploring having some sort of a common. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that the legal systems need to integrate. That may not be very pragmatic or easily achievable. Political systems will be different. But you could certainly consider certain aspects like trade-related laws, commercial laws. You could have a separate set of laws or a separate set of courts to handle those kind of cases and to facilitate it. So these would be the 2 points or suggestions I would like to place.
Thank you, Vijay. In fact, that's a very valid point about regulations. And that was one of the reasons why the India-Indonesia Business Forum was set up as well. Because there is a lot of information online. There's a lot of information available through official channels. But the information that is available from the person-to-person connect is far more useful. And it can sometimes even translate into people stepping out of their comfort zone and helping the other person across countries. And I think this is where even your ASEAN Economic Forum would play without having rules put in specifically for that particular thing to happen.
So Vijay, can I answer your first question? I think the first question was whether the ASEAN Economic Forum would move from one country to the other member country. So the answer is yes. I mean, the whole idea of setting up the ASEAN Economic Forum was that it's an extension of the Indonesian Economic Forum. We are trying to extrapolate whatever's been done and achieved here at a regional level and bring in some of the efficiencies that exist beyond the Indonesian borders. So, what we can bring in from Singapore or where we can add Thailand, etc., etc. For now, the understanding is that the first summit or the first event would be in Indonesia, and then from there on, it will start taking turns and moving around. Now, have I answered that question?
So, if I could take on your second part of your comments on how harmonization of rules for businesses should be propagated. The reality is, even in DEFA, right, we cannot sit there and negotiate on harmonizing all of these cross-border rules amongst the 10 countries. Because each country has its own legislation and systems and premises. What I want to show you won't happen in DEFA is we are not going to create an ASEAN standard. Because we are doing business on the digital agreement framework with the rest of the world. So where possible, we will try to embrace rules, regulations, and interoperability where it connects to the world. That I can assure you. But I think where the focus of DEFA and the negotiations is really going to be in the interoperability part. I think today, the interoperability procedural part is even not sorted. That's where businesses are struggling, right? I mean, just look at banking finance. Even today in ASEAN, the ministers, central bankers of ASEAN They are trying to now connect payment network systems across all of ASEAN. Now, it doesn't mean we will have one centralized platform and all of our data and financial institutions activities going to go onto that platform and move across the region. That's too simplistic. No government will allow that. Okay? What it does mean is that the 10 countries have to connect to the 10 countries at the back end of it. This is what's happening in the financial sector. I think the same thing goes for DEFA. I think we are really looking for interoperability rules in the various elements that will bring clarity to businesses, transparency, and lower cost when they know what to do and how to do to get there. But if we are dreaming that we are going to have a harmonization of rules across the 10 countries over some of these issues, it will take us 3 decades, 4 decades, and we may not arrive there. So I think when we are wishing for what we want from the business community, I think we need to be very careful what we are asking the regulators to do. There are some things regulator can do, some things regulator will not do because there's so much of national interest attached to many of those rules, regulations, regimes, which unfortunately cannot be harmonized.
I'd like to welcome Pa Ilham to the session. Pa Ilham, do you have any comments regarding the ASEAN Economic Forum?
Thank you very much, Ibu Poonam. Well, thank you very much for having me here today. Sorry I couldn't join earlier. Yes, I think talking about ASEAN and economics, if you look at some prediction that I've seen in the media regarding where's the growth in the next coming years going to come from, I think there are a few surprising things to note. One is that the prediction is that almost half of the growth in the economy globally will come from one country, which is the US. And the other half will come from everybody else, but not from China. China is sort of like stuck. That's the prediction of the economists whose analysis I read, because they're perhaps going to a stagflation period like Japan in the 90s because of the current debt crisis, which is based on property, I think, right? So where is it going to come from? There are 5 countries where are outstanding. One is basically India, the other one is Indonesia, and there's 3 others I forgot. But I mean, so the other 50%, or a bit more than 50%, I think it was 45% US, and 55% of the global growth, I mean, on top of what we have today, is going to come from these 5 countries, and Indonesia is definitely one of these 5, and India is another. That would be one comment. So I think this area is growing, and for good reasons that we all know. Another thing I think that is probably in everybody's mind is that we are a little bit aside from the global hotspots, right? We have a hotspot in East Europe, we have a hotspot in the Middle East right now, we have a potential another hotspot in Northeast Asia coming up, yes, in Southeast Asia is sort of bordering to that, but economically speaking, we are relatively shielded from that. But what will happen to Southeast Asia when the Northeast was going to go more critical, that I don't know that. I cannot predict. I would say there will be impact, yeah. But the area itself is perhaps strong enough in order to have a decent growth because we live within ASEAN in a very peaceful way with one another. So ASEAN itself as a group of countries which are doing business with one another, the question that everybody's in mind, of course, is always, will it look like something more integrated, like, for instance, the European Union? And I think most people would say, hopefully not, because there's a lot of examples which we should not emulate, because we actually know the consequences of that from the examples that we've seen in Europe. So there will be more economic coordination or collaboration or even standardization, which is good. We've seen something already in the so-called AFTA, ASEAN Free Trade Area, can be improved. But I think a slow but sure integration of the countries, not forcing everybody under one corset, I think that is something realistically good for everybody here. The vision of a very unitary form of ASEAN as a super state is probably scaring most people. So I don't think that's going to happen. And I think it's also very difficult because the countries are just too different from one another. Another thing that I like to comment is ASEAN is always asking itself about the relationship with two powers that are very dominant in this part of the world, or actually globally, which is US and China, obviously. For Indonesia, I think it's politically probably neutral, but maybe from a political system more leaning towards US. However, economically, it's almost the reverse. US doesn't play a big role here, but it's China, which is so dominant. Yeah? And I think for ASEAN, it is very important to somehow position itself in a way that it can be like that, having very good economic and very healthy economic relation with China, which is our neighbor. And that's not the case with the US. But politically, I think for most countries, I shouldn't say most, but some countries here, it's maybe from a system standpoint of view closer to the US, not being an ally of the US. Some of the countries in ASEAN are really allies of the US, like the Philippines, like Thailand to a certain degree. Others are closer to China, like Cambodia or Myanmar, Laos probably, Vietnam not so much. Yeah, so I think it's important to sort of somehow allow political diversity in order to get economic benefit. And that is, I think, what I can say for today. Thank you. So the ASEAN Economic Forum makes sense because we need to talk. Just today, maybe some people don't know, but a giant of world diplomacy has passed, Dr. Kissinger. And what I learned in the many eulogies I've seen today, or read, or seen on TV, that he was the master of bridging the unbridgeable. Because what he always wanted to avoid is war. Just keep on talking and we will find. But even small steps, he was a master in that. So basically bridging US and China in the early 70s, and then doing the aftermath, cleaning up the aftermath of the Yom Kippur. He got, I think, a Nobel Prize for that, et cetera, et cetera. And that's always little small steps, diplomatic, masterfully crafted and implemented. I think that's really a good example to follow. Yeah, talk. Don't stop talking. Yeah, and that's not what's not happening between Ukraine and Russia, by the way. Yeah? They're not talking at all, and hence the solution is just far away because they don't talk, but they have to talk. Well, I think we are talking all the time, and I said sometimes too much, but we need to act as well. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Can I just add that at the ASEAN level, for the leaders, existential issue on the geopolitics between China and US is front and center every time. And we've made it very clear, even in the latest summit that took place in September in Jakarta, the leaders had made it very clear, we are not choosing. Right? America is the #1 investor in Southeast Asia. China is the #1 trading partner to us in Southeast Asia. We can't choose. We want to work effectively with both, and nowhere are we going to make that choices, because we've also seen countries who choose end up in not so favorable circumstances, right? And I think in the world today, we have to work with all superpowers. They both bring value to us, and we need to harness that value in the best way we can with all parties. And I think that's what's going to bring wealth and relevance to ASEAN. I think that's I would say, the wise positioning of our leaders, how they have come together to collectively make a choice, to tell the world that they are not making a choice. They want to work with both. You know?
I'll just add a small point here, and I think Ilham alluded to this. When we look at the key messages of what we're doing in ASEAN, it's also important to have the right people behind us saying the things that we want them to say about, because there are a lot of various opinions. If you look around and talk to the world, there are opinions which are based on reasoning and logic. There are opinions which are based on agenda. There are opinions that are based on wanting to have, to shape the narrative in a slightly different way than what we may be. That's why I think it's important for ASEAN Economic Forum to behave like a collective wisdom of the stakeholders we believe are invested in for the right reasons. So our ability to tell the story would also be our ability to bring the right people on board who will help us tell the story, will help us to shape the narrative and help us to drive forward the vision of what ASEAN Economic Community wants for itself. And I think, Ashish, that's going to be our homework of how do we make sure that we have the right people who are able to be cheerleaders for the ideas. At the same time, pragmatic as well, right? We have to balance in a way that we come out credible and we come out in a way that everybody believes that this is actually the right points that are to be made in telling the story. So a lot of work in terms of bringing together a lot of more people, a lot of champions of the ASEAN cause. And we're seeing, like what Ilham said, it's just not just an ASEAN economic community, it's way beyond that. I think if the world is going to be shown a pathway of peace and stability, it might not come from anywhere else but from here. And it's becoming more and more apparent with the things that are going on in the last 6 months to a year. We are seeing that the ability to manage conflicts within a community that keeps talking all the time, like Ilham said, is much higher than it would be when walls are driven, and walls may be driven are a failure of the system of many of the other parts of the world. So I think Satvinder Singh has said it very well, that the importance of having a common agenda allows us to talk. Otherwise, what do we talk, right? Having DEFA, having decarbonization, these are pathways to keeping the conversation going and building cooperation between the ASEAN nations. And I think our ability to be in that story and being, is a great privilege, and I really look forward to what we're going to do over the next 1 year. Thank you.
Thank you, Sachin. Starting anything is really hard. It's just to keep going on it till it finds its own momentum and just moves on its own. So yes, a good start is everything half done. So if there are any last comments, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Funky Miswar from Indigo Telkom. Indigo Telkom is the incubator and accelerator in Indonesia. Honorable for me, I can talking to the top leader. So maybe I will starting from the startup point of view. The key of the success from the startup is the collaboration. And one of the dreams of the startup can expansion market to across nation. But the challenge from the startup is they need to knock the door one by one, maybe for venture capital, investors, or the partners, anything too hard. Then maybe spend a lot the money for that, gitu. So maybe my purpose is maybe we need to some initiatives for maybe from the ASEANs. We need to like institution every countries just for the investor windows. Investor windows is like if the startups need to consultation with the what we need to do. If you wanted to expansion, or I need to investor from another country, what I need you, what the regulation. Now, sometimes we need like this to support our startup to can grow another country, maybe like that. Thank you.
So I'll take the liberty to answer this question. So I think what you have said is a very genuine problem that most of the startup ecosystems have. ASEAN last year had started an initiative called the ASEAN India Startup Festival. And one of the reasons for that collaboration was to bring all these startups together from within ASEAN and also startups from outside of ASEAN, along with investors. Now that has taken some shape, it has matured to some extent. So there are initiatives like that which have been taken, and you can probably plug into some of these initiatives. And I'm sure there is a chapter in Jakarta itself, which is already plugged in. So it'll be good to find out what those chapters are. If we can be of any help in any ways, we'll be happy to plug you into any of these ecosystems that are there.
Just to add that besides India, now Korea is also done following India's example, a similar collaboration. So is Japan. This is Japan's summit year, 50 years of anniversary with ASEAN. one of the things they are willing to do for ASEAN is to help propagate and connect the startup universe between Japan and ASEAN. So there is quite a lot of activities and support that startups ecosystem that you may be looking at and supporting, they may be able to look at and work with the ASEAN family. Yeah.
Can I just add, I think as Sachin and I founded the Indonesia Economic Forum, so it's very heartening to see the next step of the development with Ashish and the ASEAN Economic Forum. One of the, what I would call stakeholders that would, I think, be very much interested in being part of the ASEAN Economic Forum is, of course, the academic community. And representing SMU, we have a strategy of growth in Asia. And we're really looking to set up presence in most of the ASEAN markets. So we started in Indonesia with the first overseas center. We've set up one in Bangkok now. And we'll set up one in Ho Chi Minh in the early part of 2024. So we will also have a network within ASEAN. And I think this would be a great partnership also with, of course, Singapore. So we have 4 countries within ASEAN already. Thank you.
Satvinder, firstly, thank you for recognizing our teacher training program and the kind words you spoke about that. Actually, that has gone and expanded into another program with ASEAN through the IEF called the ASEAN Youth for Digital Action, where we are digitally upskilling 1 million youth across ASEAN using the same methodology. And of course, we have been discussing the SME upskilling as well, to take it out with a similar methodology across the 10 countries. So the collaboration through IEF, now hopefully we can do it through the AEF and take it across. Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. I just wanted to finish with the last thing about business at the speed of trust. That's Stephen Covey's last book, where he wrote about trust as being the driver for business, which was also discussed yesterday in a session where they said that the money moves where there is more trust, where there is more confidence. So I hope that setting up the ASEAN Economic Forum will drive that trust and increase business. And then with those last words, I'd like to move it to Sachin to close the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent session. A big round of applause for Poonam, His Excellency Satvinder and Ashish, and Ilham, who joined us. I'd just like to, first of all, thank you for spending 2 days with us. I know many of you are here for both the days, though we did decide to fragment the sessions into 4 parts, half a day, and the next day, half a day, for a reason, because we usually have a lot of conference fatigue. And it's very difficult. I know the team from India has been here both days, and I really appreciate the time you spent with us. But I think the idea of was just for you to get a feel of what we do here. And it'll give you a window into the kind of work we're doing. And we are seeing a lot of collaboration now between India and Indonesia. And I think even with ASEAN, there is an integration between India and ASEAN. A lot of things are moving parts are there. And we are hoping that we can bridge these opportunities and find ways that we can collaborate. And the Economic Forum, by splitting or compartmentalizing into the 4 areas, I'll just repeat what those areas are because Satvinder ji, you were not here earlier. We split up the topic being unleashing the power of digitalization across the nation. And the word unleashing was important because sometimes you can unleash a tiger or you can unleash a dragon. And depending on what you unleash onto the people, you might either have a good experience or a nightmare. So understanding the management of an unleashing of digitalization is important so that we don't get too far ahead of ourselves and find that we have not built the basic infrastructure or the digital society that needs to be there to receive digitalization. So many aspects of this allows us to make sure that we don't forget, end of the day, that running a business also means running systems and running operations and running philosophies that underlie it, so that everybody can participate in what we're trying to create. So this compartmentalization of 4 areas was, first we focused on the creative economy, which I believe connects ASEAN very well. Creative economy across ASEAN is a very powerful sector to intertwine. As you do know, Indonesia is the third largest creative economy sector in the world. And that's an important thing. So how can we collaborate with the rest of ASEAN is an important story. The second was skilling to jobs, which we ran courtesy of Orbit Future Academy. And I'd like to say that skilling leading to jobs is actually the conversation. It's not education. All these years we talked about education, edtech, skilling up universities, schools. But anything you talk in that sector is 4 years away. The outcome is 4 years away because you are empowering youth who are way too young to actually contribute tomorrow. So we shifted that conversation this year, for the first time, to skilling for jobs, because that you are allowed to talk about job readiness, which is today's problem. And jobs which are ready for today and not 5 years and 10 years later. So we shifted the conversation to skills to jobs. And I think that was very well received yesterday. This morning we started with digitalization by itself, the digitalization economy. Because you know the size of the digitalization economy is $170 billion, which is an 18-fold increase. So how do we actually do an 18-fold increase in 6 years? It's a huge multiplier. And we need to find multiplier effects in order to multiplier factors, I would say, amplification factors, which would result in a healthy economy being developed 18-fold with least amount of disruption and least amount of distraction. So that was a very good session this morning we had. And then we had this afternoon session, which is about regionalization. There are 2 parts, going in within Indonesia and then going outside Indonesia, which is what we capped it with. We were blessed to have fantastic speakers. Yesterday, we started with Gita Vriawan, who flew down all the way from Stanford University, where he's a visiting scholar, just to be at the Indonesia Economic Forum. And he's been a speaker with us for many years. He's one of our top received speakers. So he opened Indonesia Economic Forum with the right mood, talking about geopolitics, actually. In fact, that was one of the key messages he had, followed by Shinta Kamdani, who was the chair of B20 during G20, and she's currently the chairman of APINDO. And she's on our advisory board as well. And she was able to give us a very good view about how APINDO represents the interest of the SME sector and the MSME sector. And something we should not forget. We had Sandiaga Uno, the Minister of Tourism, who led the whole discussion on creative economy yesterday. For those of you who were here, very insightful session. And in the afternoon, we had Director Generals and representatives from Ministry of Manpower, and we also from the Ministry of SME and Cooperatives. So we had all the right stakeholders in the room. That was the beauty of what we did. Same thing this morning. We had a session with Ilham, though because he was on a plane, we did a recorded session. And that was on this morning. We had a series of very competent speakers. We had Dr. Naveen from SMU, who was here. And in the afternoon also, we had sessions with Pa Refli, Pa Darmono, who are the original entrepreneurs of the industrialization of Indonesia. Pa Darmono, who set up Jababeka group. I would say he's a super industrialist because not only is he an industrialist, he brought many other industrialists from all over the world to come into Indonesia and set up factories across all of Indonesia, and he continues to do that. So it's this kind of depth of speakers who have supported not just this year, but they've been with us right from the very beginning of the IEF journey. From 10 years, these are the speakers who've been telling the stories and amplifying. And I think, Ashish, my takeaway is that now when we go into ASEAN Economic Forum, we would identify similar people in all these places. Pa Ilham Habibi has been, I think, our biggest supporter, because it is thanks to Ilham that we have been able to call this wonderful venue the home of the Indonesia Economic Forum. So thank you, Ilham. I think Ilham allowed it because he believes in what IEF is doing. He's been a constant supporter. He's been there at every event. And I feel that we have a lot of common vision between what he does. And I'm happy to say that Ilham would also help us guide the ASEAN Economic Forum because he has a lot of interesting views. And he has a network within the region, which we'll be able to leverage off and find common people who can help tell the story. So that's the one thing that if I could say I summarize these 2 days, great topics, great speakers, and great fellow panelists who are here. That's the formula going forward even for the ASEAN Economic Forum. We have to do it across 10 countries. So the 10x factor is something that we'll have to work on in the next 1 year. Thank you very much. Please remember, we have a cocktail evening here. There's a sundowner cocktail. We have wine, red and white, we have beer, and we have a fantastic single malt bar by Aberfeldy. And they make great cocktails. So enjoy the evening. And I would say let's celebrate together the completion of the 10th Indonesia Economic Forum. Thank you very much.